When a Chinese general boldly claimed that Filipinos can't fight, the world listened. His exact words spread like wildfire online. He said Filipino soldiers were too small, too weak, and too outdated to stand against modern forces. Many people laughed, some got angry, and others just ignored him. But what happened next silenced everyone, including the general himself. Because when a group of Chinese soldiers came face to face with Filipino warriors in real training conditions, the truth became impossible to deny. It all started with a military training exchange between elite Chinese soldiers and Filipino special forces. At first, the Chinese troops walked in with absolute confidence. They believed their technology, numbers, and advanced equipment made them unbeatable. They had trained in high-tech facilities, snowy mountains, vast deserts, and massive urban warfare centers. To them, Filipino training looked too simple, too old-fashioned, almost like something from a movie in the 1980s. Some of them even laughed, asking, "Is this really how they train?" But their confidence would not last long. The first challenge was the Philippine jungle, a place that has broken even the toughest warriors. The moment the Chinese soldiers stepped inside, the air wrapped around them like fire. The heat felt heavier than their gear, and sweat poured down their faces instantly. The ground was soft, wet, and unpredictable. Mud pulled at their boots like hands trying to drag them down. The trees were thick, the air was heavy, and every direction looked exactly the same. Meanwhile, the Filipino soldiers moved calmly and confidently. For them, the jungle was not a challenge, it was home. They walked through the thick vegetation with ease, reading animal sounds, wind direction, and even the movement of leaves. Their footsteps were so quiet that some Chinese soldiers didn't even notice when Filipinos were walking right behind them. The navigation test shocked the visiting soldiers even more. The Filipino instructors announced there would be no GPS, no drones, and no digital maps, only a compass, survival skills, and the ability to understand the land. The Chinese troops whispered to each other, assuming it would be easy. But after just a few minutes in the maze-like jungle, they realized how wrong they were. Trails vanished into nowhere. Landmarks disappeared. Swarms of insects were everywhere. The air felt too thick to breathe. Slowly, their confidence melted into frustration and then into fear. Some circled back to the same spot without even realizing it. Others walked in the wrong direction entirely. A few admitted they couldn't even tell where the sky was because the trees covered everything. The Filipino soldiers, on the other hand, barely struggled. They de-stop only to study small details like bird movements or the direction of broken branches to know exactly where they were. It was at this point that some Chinese soldiers finally understood something important. Technology cannot save you in a place that doesn't care about technology, but that was only the beginning. Next came the endurance drills. The Filipino troops moved fast across rivers, climbed muddy slopes, crawled under fallen trees, and crossed sharp rocks. They didn't rush. They just moved steadily, like it was completely normal. The Chinese soldiers tried their best, but the jungle punished them for every single mistake. Their boots filled with muddy water. Their uniforms became so heavy from sweat and mud that they could barely lift their legs. Some soldiers slipped and fell multiple times. Others vomited from exhaustion. One soldier even cried quietly because he couldn't believe how difficult it was. And still, this was just the warm-up. By the time they reached the close combat drills, the visitors were already drained. But this was the moment that completely erased the general's insult. Filipino close combat is shaped by real fighting experience. Many Filipino soldiers have faced rebels in jungles, terrorists in cities, and armed groups in rural mountains. Their training is based on survival, real threats, and the instinct to adapt. During the simulation, the Chinese soldiers tried to predict Filipino movements, but they failed every time. The Filipino fighters moved like shadows fast, unpredictable, and extremely precise. They would appear from blind spots, strike quickly, then disappear behind trees, only to reappear from a completely different direction. One by one, the Chinese soldiers were tagged out. Some didn't even know where the attacks came from. By the end of the drill, the Chinese soldiers were visibly shaken. Their earlier pride was completely gone. They now looked at the Filipinos with quiet respect. But the hardest challenge was still waiting: the legendary Filipino Hell Week. This brutal test breaks even the strongest, most well-trained soldiers. It includes long marches, heavy log carries, no sleep, cold water training, and constant psychological pressure. The Chinese soldiers believed they could endure it, but many quit within hours. Their bodies gave up. Their minds collapsed. Their muscles refused to move, and their lungs couldn't keep up with the suffocating heat and humidity. Some collapsed from pure exhaustion. Others tapped out because they were mentally done. Only a small number made it halfway, and even those few admitted openly that they had never felt anything like it before. But the most surprising part came after the training. The Filipino soldiers didn't brag, laugh, or insult them. They didn't act superior. Instead, they helped the exhausted Chinese soldiers stand up. They gave them water, shared their food, showed them survival tricks, and encouraged them. This humility shocked the visiting troops even more than the training itself. They expected harsh attitudes, but instead they were met with kindness, respect, and a quiet confidence. When the training exchange ended, several Chinese soldiers went online and told the truth. They said Filipino training was incredibly tough, far tougher than they ever expected. They admitted they underestimated the Philippines. They said the jungle was the hardest environment they had ever faced. Some even apologized publicly, saying they were wrong to laugh at the beginning. These posts went viral almost instantly. Millions of people around the world read them, shared them, and reacted with surprise. Many commented that they had no idea how strong, skilled, and resilient Filipino soldiers were. Others said the Philippines might have some of the best jungle fighters on the planet. Even military experts weighed in, explaining that Filipino special forces benefit from something technology cannot provide real-world fighting experience and extreme survival conditions. But what made the story truly powerful was the transformation. At the beginning, the Chinese soldiers arrived with arrogance. At the end, they left with respect. At the beginning, they laughed. At the end, they saluted. And somewhere far away, the Chinese general who once said Filipinos can't fight suddenly had nothing to say. His words were crushed by the truth. Because strength isn't always about size or gear or high-tech tools. True strength comes from heart, courage, discipline, and the ability to survive anything. The Filipino soldiers proved they had all of that and more. The story went viral not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. It showed failure, growth, humility, and respect. It reminded the world that you can not judge a warrior by how they look or what equipment they carry. The world learned a lesson that day, and from that moment on, no one who heard this story ever underestimated Filipinos again. Thanks for watching.